All right. My name is Erik Beitzel, and I've been an urban neighbor for 4 years now. When I decided to become an urban neighbor, I had recently left my job and was asking some big questions. One of these questions was, how do I respond to injustice and suffering as a person of faith? 6 months into my urban neighbor experience, there were 3 of us who decided to do what we call a street weekend. The purpose of the weekend was to gain compassion for the homeless and marginalized in our communities. The idea was 48 hours on your own, no money, no cell phone, no contact with friends or family, and find food wherever you can. It was referred to as a fast from middle class. It would be a drastic misstatement to say that we were going to walk a mile in the shoes of the homeless. That would imply that we were actually experiencing what it's like to be homeless. This was just a temporary and very limited glimpse. The first morning, I waited outside a shelter and watched the line grow. When the doors opened, the mass of people flooded down into the basement, and we all started tearing through boxes of donated clothing. The frantic pace was driven by the hope of getting something nice, something clean, something that fit. My clothes I found for the weekend did not belong in any of these categories. The same shelter that provided clothing also served breakfast. So I went upstairs, and for the first time, I found myself on the other side of that serving line. The weekend contained a lot of little moments like this. I remember walking past a restaurant one night and looking in, seeing everyone eating, laughing, and talking. And as I stood outside looking in, I knew that wasn't for me. I knew I didn't belong in there. I wasn't a part of that. If I went in there, it would become obvious that I couldn't buy anything, at which point I'd be asked to leave. And this wasn't something I had to think about and ponder. I mean, I took one look at that restaurant and I felt that immediately. But this wasn't my reality. I mean, I knew I could buy anything on that menu. I can't imagine the anxiety, worry, and hopelessness that some people live on a daily basis, where there is no reset button on their situation. So much was experienced in those 48 hours that I think you would have to try really hard not to be changed by it. And if forced to do a street weekend, I think a lot of people would try really hard not to be changed by it. Because when you empathize with those who are less fortunate than you, and instead of dismissing this empathy, you cultivate it, what kind of effect could that have on your life? Could you ever go back to the way you were before without deceiving yourself? Several years after the street weekend, I was volunteering at an event called Project Homeless Connect. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a biannual event that brings an incredible amount of resources under one roof at the Minneapolis Convention Center to benefit those who are experiencing or vulnerable to homelessness. As a volunteer, you do a short training beforehand, and on the day of the event, you match up with individuals, couples, or families as they come in, and you walk with them, identifying and locating services that they need. Sometimes you spend the better part of a day with the same person. So this one particular time, I'm sitting there with this woman at the legal services area. And I'm sitting there looking around, amazed at how many different types of people there are. And all sharing the same humanity, and all sharing a similar plight. Every one of them had an obstacle or question in their life that was dependent on this legal system. I started to recall some of the people I've been paired with at events past, thinking about some of the stories they had shared with me about feeling powerless within the system. It struck me that those who are in greatest need of advocacy are often those who have the most difficult time finding an advocate. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I went home that night and I started researching law school. So now I'm in my first year of law school. 4 years ago, I never could have predicted this. Looking forward, I couldn't tell you where I'll be in another 4 years. What I do know is that I am called to live with humility, to treat others with dignity, and to live with compassion for those who are suffering. In my experience, doing what I believe is right means that a lot of times I don't know what to do. Because in doing what I believe is right, I'm often led into circumstances that I would never invite on my own. But there's a peace in that. It's this idea of abandoning oneself to truth. And I'm going to close with some words from Jesus in John 12:25, where he says, "Anyone who holds on to life just as it is destroys that life. But if you let it go, reckless in your love, you'll have it forever, real, and eternal." Thank you.